You're about to enjoy a Cloudcast original. Local stories, local storytellers, local brands.
Have you ever felt that you as a woman may not appear to measure up when you see incredible women in strong roles? You may be surprised when hearing from women in these positions and how we all share many of the same challenges. Thank you for joining us for the CEO Leading In podcast with Rebecca Jones as we share the journeys of women.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Jones, your host of CEO. We are on an exploration together to discover more about the personal journeys of incredible women in both career and life. We all have paths to share that sometimes take incredible turns, deep resilience, and courage to navigate. My hopes are that the challenges shared here encourage women to take leaps of faith and growth when a journey feels too difficult or unachievable. There is great strength deep within each one of us. These stories are meant to share the way strong women have taken their dreams to strive and thrive to new heights despite their sometimes rocky paths and found a way to lead in. So today we are here with Nancy Sasaki, the CEO from United Way. How are you today, Nancy?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm so excited to have you here today and talk a little bit about what you do and what does a day look like in your life? I'm really curious as to what that's like every day.
Well, it certainly changes day to day and what I'm doing. And today is one of those days that feels like it's all back to back to back. And there's, now it's like this hybrid between I'm in the office, I'm on Zoom, I'm in person. It's like I have to really check my calendar every time. Like, am I supposed to be on Zoom or am I supposed to be driving someplace? So it's one of those kinds of things.
Yeah, every person I talk to talks like that, and they just say, gosh, I never know what I'm going to get. I honestly look at my schedule usually the day before and go, oh gosh, I have to be here and I have to be there. And I too have to check and figure out, where it all is because it is a little bit different nowadays. So tell us a little bit about yourself as, maybe a fun childhood story, something that maybe people don't know about you.
Oh, fun childhood story.
Yeah.
Oh, what's so funny is that the childhood stories that just popped up are not necessarily really fun. The one that is probably was really significant to me, it really changed my perspective on kind of life and where people come from, is I was in, I think, 4th or 5th grade, and a new girl had moved in up the street, and my other girlfriend and I played with her a lot, Cindy, and one day I went up the street to see if Cindy could come out and ride bikes or do something like that, and knocked on the door. Her sister came to the door and said, I'm sorry, but Cindy can't play with you anymore. I was like, what happened? Why? And she said, you remind our father of the war, so she can't play with you. And I remember walking away going, like, okay, I think I know which war she's talking about, but what do I have to do with that? And why would he hold that grudge now, and what's going on? It just really got me thinking about the perspective that people have and how much people hold on to the history and how meaningful that can be. And that's really significant when you're in 5th grade, trying to look at life from that perspective.
I can't even imagine as a child what that felt like, because I, for one, I feel like I judge a person on who they are. It doesn't matter who they're related to. It doesn't matter where they came from. It matters on what their heart is like. And I really, I just judge people on their actions and not about what people say about them, because we know that can be very, very wrong many times. And so that's really sad. But I think it's probably helped you in giving back. I mean, you definitely give back.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I said, it really got me thinking about where people come from, what their experiences are like, what people miss out on because of those judgments or because of the things that they harbor. It really made me think about those that just could learn so much more about the community that they live in.
Right. Wow. Well, and it probably keeps them from doing things that they have available in their life, unfortunately. Huh. Well, so I have a question for you.
Okay.
If there was one word that you could use to describe yourself, what would that word be?
The first word that came to mind was actually goofy. And and because I feel like I like to be goofy and I enjoy humor and laughing and just having fun and trying new things, um, sometimes you have to tone that down in a leadership role because people want to see you as a more serious and taking things like very seriously, and that you're that compassion and caring is not seen as goofy. So,
Right.
yeah.
That's interesting. I was actually going to say compassionate.
Ah.
I could see that in you. Okay, well, so tell us a little bit about how long you've been in your career, and if it hasn't been for very long, what you did before that.
Yeah, so I've actually been in the nonprofit world all of my professional career. I sometimes think I fear the for-profit world because I'm not driven just by the bottom line. In the nonprofit world, you do have to be driven by your bottom line, maybe even more so because of the way that our cycles work. But so I've been in the nonprofit world all my life. I've been with United Way since September of 2018. So I had just barely come on board, gotten my feet underneath me, getting moving forward, and then the pandemic slams us down, right? So now that we're kind of back into it, I feel like I'm just starting all over. But fortunately, we had all of that time to really plan and strategize and get really solid and comfortable in who we are and what we're doing and being able to move our strategic plan forward. I think it's amazing we were able to get that done during the pandemic, to get my board involved and ensure that we, set that path going forward for 2030.
So how did it change what you're doing before the pandemic?
Oh gosh, it's just changed how we interact with people and how we build community and how we talk about what we're doing. That's one of the challenges that we definitely have, that during the pandemic, rightfully so, we were so concerned on making sure people had food on the table, making sure they had a roof over their heads, very, very immediate needs. But what we're learning as we come out of this is that we didn't do too much to keep them from getting out of that place for the future. Should hopefully not this should ever happen again, or even some sort of other tragedy. The people who will still be most at risk are those that allowed me to work from home, to be able to get my groceries without worrying about whether there would be food on the shelves for me to buy, right? So we are now looking at what that long-term strategy should be to try and get people out of this inability to actually thrive in San Diego County. And our goal and our strategic plan in Edict 2030, Minding the Gaps, is looking at those disparities that exist for people in our community, especially in the realm of education and in family stability. So in those two areas, we really have focused a lot of our work.
And really being able to set goals too, because a lot of folks, unless their family has taught that to them, a lot of them really don't understand that you have to have goals, and sometimes they're very, very difficult to get to, and all of the steps that you have to take to get to that. So I think a lot of it really is goal planning, education, and then, setting, some plans that you can get done, and one at a time, and then, kind of feeling like, okay, I've done this and now I get to move on to the next step. I think that is something, a lot of our kids don't really understand that. And they can't really see.
Yeah, I think that, what really what happens a lot with our kids is like you can imagine, like when you were younger, you had these aspirations. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a veterinarian. I'm going to be, you have all of these dreams, and then life starts to happen. Yeah. But what we also know is that in many ways, our education system fails many of our young kids. And if they're not reaching reading level by third grade, they may not graduate high school. I mean, third grade, they had nothing to do with that, right? But if you're not reading by third grade, you don't have the reading skills to start learning. And it's the learning that happens after third grade that gets you to graduation. So sometimes kids have all of these hopes and dreams, right? But life happens and you don't know what that real hope could be. We fortunately have a lot of stories of people who overcame those kinds of challenges and did more in their lives. But I don't think people see that as always their life.
Well, I really hope the pandemic hasn't put us in a situation where many of our kids really got stuck and they aren't able to get out of that, because that is a concern always. And, and their mental health, part of this too, because it's really been tough on them.
Absolutely, it's been tough on them, and we do know now that in looking back over the last couple of years, what has happened to our kids are in education, right? They have fallen behind, and we talk a lot about the Black and brown Hispanic kids that have fallen behind, even more so than the white and Asian kids. And that's where we're really going to see future issues and concerns. Right now, with the Great Resignation, as they talk about trying to hire people into positions, seems to take a little bit longer. If these kids just imagine when they grow up and they're already behind and they might not graduate high school, the pool of candidates is really going to be impacted. There are some early estimates saying that they could already be losing as much as $61,000 in future income because of this right now.
Wow.
That's huge, and it'd be great to be working on the strategies to help them catch up.
Right. So thinking about everything that's going on and all of the challenges that you've had, how do you measure success? Because I imagine it would probably be a little different today than it was maybe 3 years ago.
It is a little bit, and part of it is because we got so much clarity in what it is that we want to accomplish at United Way, and really wanting to focus in on those reading proficiencies. We want to focus in on graduation, school, kids getting out of high school, working on ensuring that kids in 6th grade on up know what that graduation plan is. Expanding from the areas that we are currently working in into other areas that we know are high need areas in terms of education proficiency. But also we are doing the family stability work, and we're measuring all of that success. There's a short-term success that we're looking at as to whether or not they pick up new skills, whether they're learning to read more, picking up more books, that they even have books in their homes. That's a small-term measure of success. The long-term will be when we can look out at 2030 and look back and say, hey, wow, those kids that maybe were way behind, some of them have caught up.
Right. Well, and helping them find that love of reading, I mean, it can be so enriching of your life. Well, it is totally enriching of your life.
Absolutely.
And, finding out about things that you don't know about. I mean, I try to learn something every day myself. I think there's always a thirst for learning in so many people, and just finding things that you don't know anything about. I love doing that. But I think it's something that is kind of taught to you, and you kind of are encouraged to do when you're younger.
Yeah, we hear so many different stories about how kids have learned to read. In my life, my sister was the one who read to me. I guess she liked to read, and so she found me somebody to read to. But I was reading at 3 years old.
Yeah.
That's not everybody's story. Many times it is a parent, maybe it's an aunt, or maybe it's a friend or somebody else that's reading to these kids and allowing them to learn how to read. But reading is such an escape. It's like even for the last series of books I read were Harry Potter books, and it's like a total escape, right? And then to see the reality of that in the movie, but it allows you to travel. It allows you to expand your knowledge. It allows you to see things in both kind of like what could be imaginary types things, but also in reality, and what you could be and what could become of you and what's happening in the world.
So you seem like you're probably pretty busy. So I'm wondering, how do you balance your life and your work? Do you do that well? And you know what? I think it's cyclical myself. I think sometimes yes, sometimes maybe no.
That's really an interesting question and I don't know when I started this, but it became very, very important to me. And so I really do have what I think is a fairly good kind of work and life balance. I play beach volleyball every Saturday and Sunday. I protect that time. I try not to make commitments on those 2 mornings so that I can get my beach volleyball in. I play tennis about 2 or 3 times a week, and that's in the evening, so I try and protect that time so that I actually have that. And then, scheduling a time that's really just for my own things I want to do beyond my sports. So I really think that I do have that. But there are times that you have to kind of give it up.
Yeah.
It's like maybe there's an interview that they want to have done on a Saturday morning at one of the events that we're doing. I have to give up my volleyball. But, I really do try to protect that time. And I'm probably better at that farther along in my professional career than I was early on.
Yeah. So just kind of thinking about as being a woman leader, have you had any barriers or roadblocks? Right?
Maybe the question really should be what barriers and roadblocks, right? If you're female, person of color, there are so many of the statistics that I don't follow, right? I shouldn't be in a CEO position given that I was a single parent for many years, that I'm a person of color, that I'm female. But those are not excuses. They were the challenges. My sister has always told me that I've always been driven to do more. I've not seen that in myself, but she definitely has seen it. But so there's those times. Actually, there was a conversation. I had gone for a position, and I was supporting then the person who actually got the position, was at an event. And one of the people that had been on the search committee came up to me and said, I'm really glad we hired him. Get that, him, right? Because we had some really important work that we had to get done and some challenges that we had to make with regard to staffing. And so he was the right person. If I hadn't have been at an event, I might have given that person my mind on what that sounded like to me.
Yeah, right.
It's you just kind of shake your head a little bit. I've had board members, female board members even, that have, instead of talking to me about an issue ahead of time, decide to bring it to the board meeting and just lay it out there as if you knew this was a problem. Why didn't you fix it? So it happens all over the place. It happens so frequently that sometimes you don't even see it anymore, unfortunately.
So, well, that seems like resistance in with potentially some men, but let's talk a little bit about the woman part of that, because that is a very interesting thing to explore. I have felt that many times there are women that are not supportive of other women, and it can get downright catty and very counterproductive for what we're all trying to do. Because I believe, as one of the reasons why I even started this podcast is, I think women, when you build up other women around you, and it's irregardless of whether you're in the same, the same realm of career and that sort of thing, we do better together. And when we're building up other women and, men too, honestly, I like to just build people up because I'm very positive.
Yeah.
But specifically, I mean, I've even been at a conference before, and I said, there's a problem with mean girls, and it's not good. It's very bad. And whenever I see a mean girl, I will honestly say something to them. And I'll say, I don't understand where you're coming from. Because truthfully, you're tearing someone down, and that can't make you feel good. And I've actually had people look at me and go, huh, and actually think about it because they don't expect someone to actually say something to them.
Yeah, I think sometimes my perspective is that they don't even realize they're doing it, that maybe they've been doing it for so long, they don't even realize they're doing it. So many times it is important to call it out so that they can maybe improve. My culture, and as a Japanese person, as my culture is much more that we don't like conflict. And so, depending on the setting, depending on the person, depending on the relationship, depending on a lot of factors will really drive me as to whether or not I say something to someone. But I also come into those situations never expecting it. I always expect that people really do look out for the better position of everybody else that's in their realm, because if we all get stronger and we all get better, like the work that we're trying to accomplish will always be better, right? And it might even get done faster, maybe more efficiently, if we're all really working together.
Well, the truth is no one can actually do something by themselves. Not
no
generally.
Way. No way.
You have to have a whole group of people wanting the same thing and moving along with you. And you might have your different styles, but if you're working together toward the same goal, you'll eventually end up there. And you're right. It could be quicker, could be slower. And, sometimes I say, okay, well, if you're not with me and you want to go off on this other side, the rest of us are all going this way. just stay out of our way, please. I mean, because it could be so counterproductive if you're just, not coming along. Anyway, so are there any lessons that you've learned that you'd like to share with young women and that they could learn and apply to their careers?
Yeah, one of the ones that was really important to me as I was going through my career was many times, and it wasn't just one time, many times, there were people who I was working with that saw more potential in me than I saw in myself. And they really pushed me to do more, or they pointed me to something that I didn't realize I could do. But it was their belief in me that allowed me to grow and to become what I am today. And so I think the message to young girls is have confidence in yourself for sure, but also listen to what other people are kind of pushing and nudging you to do, and maybe take them up on it, because you never know where that might lead you as well.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with fear, too. If you're afraid of something, you might not try it, even if someone's telling you that you might do well with that. I think it's good to try things that seem a little bit scary. I used to have a real issue with public speaking. And I used to think, oh, there's just no way. And, I mean, I've actually been in front of 700 people. And I thought that, 10 years ago, I thought there was no way that could ever be me.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, if you know what your content is, you can actually break through things just if you try it.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
I tell young people all the time, try things that are outside your comfort zone. Obviously not dangerous things, but things that are really outside of your comfort zone, because you never know, you might have a passion for it. And then it's a growing experience, a learning experience that will help mold you to become what you're ending up being. And,
Absolutely.
Honestly, even in my 50s, I don't feel like I am where I'm supposed to be yet. I think I'm still going to gradually keep moving forward, right?
One of the situations I found myself in was I worked in women's health for a while, and one of the assignments that I got was to actually lead the group of nurse practitioners. I don't have a medical background, I got a biology degree, but that didn't make me a nurse practitioner, and it certainly, I'm like, how am I supposed to lead the nurse practitioners? But part of that was also learning, what are my skill sets? What do I bring to this meeting? What do I not have? So when they are making medical decisions, I can't jump into that, but I can see it from different angles and different perspectives. And so learning what you really bring to the table is an important role too.
Very, very good. Very good. So how did this journey choose you? Or did it?
Yeah. There's certainly different ways of looking at that as to whether or not it chose me or I chose it. But I knew early on that I wanted to be working in the community. I knew that I wanted to be in a place where I could make decisions that had an impact in a positive way on the community that I was serving. I thought it was in health, and I was definitely in health for a long time. But it's interesting to see in this role now, I think it chose me in that way because I started out with biology and health as my undergraduate degrees, and I got a teaching certificate. I thought, like my mother, I would be a teacher, right? Oh my God, that is not the place for me, and I admire teachers to this day because of that. But now to be full circle and working at United Way and looking how we can have an impact on kids' learning and their education, it's almost like, yeah, this is where I was supposed to be. I never figured that out when I graduated. So in some ways, I knew I wanted to work in community, but somehow my journey found me in this way.
Well, and sometimes you stumble on it. So you try this and then you think, oh, maybe that's not quite right for me. But I think it helps shape you. And it does,
Absolutely.
Again, back to, trying new things.
Yeah.
I think, that really is important information, to help people think about, okay, I want to do something. I don't know what it's going to be. And think about this. I mean, kids that are in their early 20s, did you know who you were when you were in your 20s?
I didn't know who I was, but what was really interesting for me was that my 8th grade science teacher was the one that really inspired me to want to go into science of some form. I didn't know what. In fact, I thought I wanted to be a lab tech. I wanted, like many times people, because something happens in their families, for me it was I wanted to discover the cure for cancer, right? So I wanted to be a lab tech so I could really get in there and look at the cells and really figure that out. Obviously, I'm not a lab tech. I never worked in a lab. That probably wouldn't have suited me very well. But, I knew kind of the field. I just certainly didn't know to do what. I
Right.
thought I knew, but I think being open to what life brings to you is a good way to kind of like let the journey take you where you should be going and
Yeah,
trust in that.
definitely. So, what are you most passionate about in your journey?
Oh, gosh.
There's probably a few
There
things.
are quite a few
Yeah.
things. I think that one of the things that I think young girls should also learn is that know what your own core values are for yourself and never, ever compromise that for a job, for, the work that you're doing, for anything like that. Don't compromise those because it's real important to feel good about yourself and who you are and what you're doing. Um, so I think that just working in the community, being able to see that some of the decisions I have made have really had an impact on people's lives and in a positive way, whether it was in healthcare and having access to that healthcare, whether it was being able to, work with the students that we're working with and create opportunities for them that they think they're interested in. So there's so many things along the way.
I think that's really good advice. Core values. I mean, everyone has a different way too of showing those to others, right? And it brings something to the table. I think your unique way of showing what your core values are, and definitely, and a lot of people do that for money. A lot of people change their core values. They go, I used to think this, but and that's really sad because I think when you get away from that, it can hurt just your whole who you are,
Yeah, absolutely. Some people do it for money. Some people
Yeah.
do it to be with a person.
right?
And they might say, well, it's not that bad, but it is. If you
Yeah.
really can identify what your own values are and not compromise them, you will feel better about what you're doing. You will feel like energized to do what you're doing and to interact with the people you're interacting with.
So can you share with us some of your role models? We'd
Oh,
love to hear who they
gosh.
are.
So, that's an interesting one because as I was thinking about that question and what I might say, it's hard for somebody who is a female person of color to look out there in the world and see that there are any role models. I think especially when I was growing up, certainly that's changed quite a bit, but my role models were really within my family. I mean, immediately thinking about my mother, who at that time, most women, when they got pregnant, stopped working. My mom was only pregnant and then stopped working when she was pregnant. And as soon as she could go back to work, she went back to work and was a teacher. So that's an inspiration there. My grandfather, both grandfathers on both sides of the family, required that their daughters go to college. In fact, on my mom's side of the family, my grandfather required all of his daughters to go to college, and there were 6 of them. And the 2 sons stayed at home and worked on the farm so the
Mm.
girls could go to college. Like, who does that,
Yeah.
But that's really inspirational. And then on my father's side of the family, my grandmother decided at, I think, age 17 or 18 that she wanted to learn more about Christianity and the Methodist religion. And so she left Japan as a single female and came to the United States and played the piano in the Methodist church.
Wow.
And, like, again, just unheard of. She came over at the turn of the 20 20th century, so in the
Yeah.
1900s, that's when she came over. That was unheard of for a single female to do that, right? So those are where I find those kinds of role models and strength and challenging the status quo and just looking at what you think could be better for yourself and for your life. And so I think it's more in my family that I've seen those kinds of role models that really set the stage for me.
Well, and really outside of what you would see as a stereotype. I mean, the fact that the
Absolutely.
women were actually striving more than the men in your family, and that was based on your parents pushing you to do that. I think that's
Absolutely.
very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it still continues to this day in my family. We were all we all had to take piano lessons. We all had to learn some sort of musical skill, move on from the piano to some other instrument. I played the clarinet.
Okay.
First chair in high school. Yes, I'm very proud of that. But again, that's part of that drive. It's always to whatever you take on, try to do the best you can in it and what you're doing.
Definitely. So that sounds like maybe some advice, because I was going to ask you, what is some advice that you would give to some young women that are going to be the next leaders? What would you say to them?
It's learning from the good and the bad. I had one CEO who was not the best. I learned a lot from that person, about what not to do, how not to treat people, how best to run an organization. I learned a lot. But I've also had some real stellar ones that really allowed me a free range of exploration of how to do something, and just was much more advisory and telling and talking and having discussions. And so just looking out there at what examples there are, both good and bad, and learn from those and incorporate that into who you are and who you want to be. Again, based on your own values, how are you going to take that learning and those experiences and those examples, and make that your own reality?
I love that, because I think the same thing. I don't actually read leadership books.
Mm-hmm.
I like to observe people, and men and women, and I look at things and I say, oh, I really value that about that person, or I really value that about that person. And it's not political. It's not any of those things. It's as people of how they lead. And when I look at, and I do it, of course, in my own way. I think that's another important part, with your own values, but also your own style, because that can be vastly different from most people. We're unique. We're all unique.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't saying emulate somebody.
Sure.
Don't become somebody else.
Yeah,
like just bring those experiences. Watch what they're doing. Watch how people react to it.
Right.
And you can learn so much from that.
Definitely. So what's next for you? I think you have something up your sleeve. I'd like to know what that is.
Oh, I don't really know what's next for me, and I probably couldn't say that on air because a board member might be listening and they might be like, "Where is she going? What do you mean? What is she doing?" But in terms of our work at United Way, we are looking at how we can expand, how we can reach more children, how we can really incorporate parents into the work, because definitely, as we learned in the pandemic, parents became much more the educational teachers alongside the school teachers, right? But the family teachers that they became, and having some skills, but not all the skills, and doing the best they could, and really, keeping their kids on track for learning in the various different family settings that they had. So, we're really looking at how we can begin to work within the community as a whole. And hear all of those voices from the schools, from the students, from the parents, from the businesses, the nonprofit organizations, and figure out how do we build the strongest way for these kids to be successful in their education lives. At the same time, families can't do that if they don't have a stable income, if they don't have some supports that are coming in. We run the Earned Income Tax Credit Coalition, and that's where people who really don't think they're getting money back from the federal government could actually be getting money back. So we encourage people to look at that. But how do we expand that to more families? Because we know there's more people that are eligible that aren't filing for those claims.
Well, and I think, during the pandemic, we've learned that you're right. Teachers are parents now. And parents have to figure out how to connect with the teachers. And it's been a really, I think, difficult journey. I've heard from a lot of parents the frustration with trying to get to work, trying to also get their kids educated. And I think that we will probably have another pandemic or something along those lines again. I know.
Right.
I don't want to say it's going to happen. But, we really do need to figure out things. We do need to figure out how to evolve out of this. We're smart people. We definitely need to find a way to say, okay, this is how we do it, and really have like a model and, a plan. I think always having a plan. And I'm the woman who says, I not only want a plan A, I want a plan B, a C, a D, and an E. Yeah, because you just never know what your fallback position needs to be. And it's going to always evolve, right? Depending on the situation.
You're going to have to be able to pivot all along the way, right? Like
Yeah.
you think this is the exact way that you're going to get something done. And hopefully if you are listening to your community and you're listening to the people that you're serving, you can incorporate that in and pivot, or maybe it's a little tweak. It might not be significant, but You've got to be listening to them. I think I was really struck during the pandemic. You just assume everybody knows how to use computers. There were families who didn't have an email address, and so to communicate with their teachers, they, one, had to get a computer, two, have the bandwidth in the household to support everybody being on it at one time, and then three, learn how to use an email address and how to get how to respond and how to attach something. Good grief, there's some people that still don't know, that have been on computers for a while, that don't know some of those techniques. So, there's all different levels of learning that families need.
Well, we've definitely learned a lot. And thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate you being with us today. Nancy Sasaki from the United Way San Diego. Really loved hearing about you, loved hearing about what you're doing, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that was powerful. We hope you've been lifted and encouraged by today's inspiring voice. Always remember that life doesn't look exactly the same for each one of us. Never stop dreaming, striving, and thriving. In future episodes, we look forward to bringing you powerful stories from amazing women who learn how to lead in to challenges. Thank you for listening and being part of our community with SheEO host, Rebecca Jones.
You have been listening to a Cloudcast original. Local stories, local storytellers, local brands. Find more stories at cloudcast.us.